Hello, hello, hello. Hey, hey. It's Jennifer Palmer, and you're listening to the Welly Walk podcast. Oh my gosh, I wish you could see outside today. It is glorious sun. Yes, we are at the end of April, which is crazy pants considering. I feel like we just came out of February, out of January. But spring is still doing its best spring, which is making you doubt your clothing choices at every moment. And you got to bring sun cream all of a sudden. Yay, sun. Here we are. We're back. And thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming today. And anyone new, thank you. Hi. How are you? It's great to see you. But just a little note. For anyone new, you might want to go back to the first episode, The Catalyst, because you will get the most benefit of this podcast if you do so. But also maybe at least go back to a couple episodes ago, A Vision of the Future Part 1, How Not to Repeat a Midlife Crisis, because this episode is going to be A Vision of the Future Part 2, all about jealousy, identity, and your destiny. How they're all interwoven with each other. But first, before we do any of that, just a little quick check-in. It's been a little while, I know. What's been going on with me? I've been struggling a bit. I've been having a lot of my ME, my chronic fatigue. It feels like one of those weighted blankets gets put over my head, and it will last for at least a day, if not several days, if not a week. So I've been trying to recover from that. And then I got the 24-hour flu, shivering, fever, vomiting, the whole 9 yards. Then it lingered for about a week. And the ME got even worse after that, because sickness can make the ME worse. So it's just been kind of a tumbleweed of not so great. But the whole time I was thinking about this episode and how I really wanted to record it and get it to you because we have unfinished business. Vision of the Future Part 1, How Not to Repeat a Midlife Crisis. If you listen to that, I had some really big ideas, which have been huge turning points for me, realizing the things that are holding me back and that have been creating a mindset for my whole adult life that has profound effects on my ability to create the life that I want. We talked about Dr. K, again, my esteemed psychopomp, who I just adore, who's Dr. Alok Kanoja, who founded The Healthy Gamer, and he has his own podcast, and he has an amazing website with lots of resources to help us navigate our minds and figure out all the things that he's talking about on his podcast and on all these other podcasts that I've been finding him on and stalking him a bit. I feel a bit with Dr. K like it's that scene from Bridesmaids, the one where they're behind a tree hiding and doing sit-ups and they're watching a guy across the field, this big guy teaching boot camp. And he sees them and he's like, I see you. I know what you're doing back there. And then they pretend to be dancing and they're like, hey, we love you. And they run off. I feel like I'm a bit like that with Dr. K. I keep stalking him on the interweb, looking for his podcast appearances and gleaning wisdom and getting free therapy instead of paying for it. So sorry, Dr. K, but thank you so much for everything. And so we talked about his take on what happens when you're having a quarter life crisis. And my hypothesis is that it's the same as having a third life crisis and a midlife crisis, or that somehow they feed into each other and it's something's unresolved that you keep skipping over and it's going to repeat itself on you like a bad burrito. And then we also talked about the idea of loss of the future dimension or foreshortened future, which is this idea in psychology where if you have trauma, if you have traumatic events in your life, for some of us, it will turn off the part of the brain that allows us to plan a future for ourselves, which is crazy. And so we end up in this unending present that we're trying to survive each day. And I don't think I mentioned this in the last episode. Dr. K said that people who suffer from this can be effective they can be productive, but they rely on external stimuli to give them a deadline. So they're not really planning their own future. They're reacting to pressure from outside to act and to get to a certain goal, which was interesting. I was thinking, absolutely, I'm really good at that. Like, give me structure, give me a goal, give me something to work, a framework to work in, and I will be brilliant at it. And this feeds into the virtue trap masochist personality, I think. I am fantastic at taking care of other people's needs when I see them, and really bad at taking care of myself. And you can see clearly what somebody else needs, and those needs just are constant, and you can drown in it, and you can feel virtuous because you are sacrificing your own health and happiness to help other people. But in the long run, you're going to fall on your face and your ass, and you are going to become resentful and angry, and you will suffer the consequences physically and mentally, as I have. So we talked about these things in that episode, and it all came down to the fact that there is trauma. There is trauma that a lot of us just don't deal with. I feel like it's interesting because trauma in and of itself feels triggering. The word trauma seems triggering in our culture. It's like you're a snowflake if you want to dwell on your trauma, if you want to think about the bad things that happened to your past. You don't have any grit, right? There's that feeling of an overreaction against people getting in touch with their feelings, which generations younger than me are quite good at. But what is the line between emotional regulation and emotional intelligence and becoming better at those things? And when does it become navel gazing? Do you know what I mean? And I think, being a good New Englander, as I am, and I recognize it in people in this country of England, of the United Kingdom, that the English and the New Englanders are all very good at just getting on with it. Don't think about yourself. Don't dwell on the past. Just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and do the thing, shovel the snow, and get on with it. Help the people around you and do your duty, and don't cry. And I think to a certain extent that can be a really great attribute that gives you a lot of grit and resilience. But on the other hand, a lot of us just stuff our feelings and the things that hurt us, especially from childhood, deep down and don't resolve them, and they haunt us, and they do trigger us, and they create issues in our present and issues for our future, which is what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, let's go back. Let's rewind. There's my amazing rewind sound. I know you think it's just a real tape deck, but it's me. It's me. We're going back to November of 2024. So we've moved forward from October. Thank goodness. We survived the end of October, which was the autumn half term when the kids were off for a week, and I was doing my usual thing of not making any plans for the half term and just trying to survive it, and feeling just the pressure of it, and not enjoying myself, and resenting these half terms. And the kids were bored and constantly whining and needing my attention. And I was still recovering from my surgery. My surgery was back at the end of February. And it was going to be a year, they said, of me recovering my energy. And as someone who suffers with ME, it was very much expected that I was going to have a rough time, and my ME, my chronic fatigue, was going to be triggered. And so I was being mindful of this, and I knew that the October holiday was going to push me over the edge, and it did. But finally we got to the end, and I was coming back to the school gates, pushing my children into their teacher's arms fondly. Bye-bye, see you later, don't let the door hit you on the way in. And getting back in touch with all of my school mums and dads, seeing them at the gates all smiley as well, and tanned, some of them. And the thing that happens after a week of holiday is that you get in touch with these people and you get to find out what they did for their holidays. And inevitably, it's something much more exciting than what I ever do. And what comes up in me at these times is always jealousy. This feeling of jealousy. I get to hear so and so went off to Morocco with the kids, so and so went off to Spain. Someone's got a new car and it's all shiny and it's electric. Wow. Or somebody had the wherewithal to put their kids into a camp for the entire week and got to work and have space to themselves. Any of these things sound amazing to me. Or maybe they just went to Norfolk and went to the grandparents' house. Whatever it is, they did something. They did something with that time. And here I was at home, just trying to survive each day, doing all the menial house labor and babysitting the kids and having to be their emotional support animal. Um, and jealousy is a funny emotion. At once, it is full of admiration for this other person and the thing that they've done or have. And at the same time, resentment, and then shame and guilt that you don't have that thing. And it's interesting because at this time I was finishing up with The Artist's Way, and Julia Cameron has a very interesting take on jealousy, which I was playing in my head with, and I was noticing, I was becoming aware of when I feel jealousy and how I can actually spin it and use it to my own betterment. So I want to read to you what she says about jealousy. I think it's quite brilliant. So she says, pushing up my glasses. I don't actually wear glasses, but if I did, that's what I'd do right now. She says, jealousy is always a mask of fear. Fear that we aren't able to get what we want. Frustration that somebody else seems to be getting what is rightfully ours, even if we're too frightened to reach for it. At its root, jealousy is a stingy emotion. It doesn't allow for the abundance and multiplicity of the universe. Jealousy tells us there is room for only one poet, one painter, one whatever you dream of being. The truth, revealed by action in the direction of our dreams, is that there is room for all of us. But jealousy produces tunnel vision. It narrows our ability to see things in perspective. It strips us of our ability to see other options. The biggest lie that jealousy tells us is that we have no choice but to be jealous. Perversely, jealousy strips us of our will to act, when action holds the key to our freedom. So, I thought that was just brilliant because I felt seen in this moment of, yes, that is definitely what jealousy does. It makes you feel like you're not allowed to have this thing because somebody else already has it. It's weird. But Julia Cameron challenges us. She has an exercise called the jealousy map. And you can do this for yourself. Have a go with it. Experiment. Think about it next time you feel this green-eyed monster rising within you. First column, you write down somebody that you're jealous of. The second column, you write down what is the thing that you're jealous of. And then in the third column, you write down what is something you could do to bring you closer to having that thing as well. So it takes it and gives you agency over this. It's just like Dr. K says about other emotions, about anger, about any emotion. Emotion is telling you to act. Yes, it's a signal to pay attention to something. It's a learning signal. It's telling you to learn from something, but it's also prodding you to do something about it. So jealousy is telling you something that you would like to have, or hinting like this is where you need to go to get where you need to go. You need to look for this thing. Get strong enough, get brave enough to realize that you could have it as well. And it's interesting because in acting, when you study your character, or in screenwriting, when you're writing your character, the impetus behind emotions and dialogue is always really deep and quite hidden. And if you just go to the surface level, if someone got a new car, I could very well just say, I'm jealous because they got a car and I have this old beater. And I really want a Land Rover like their Land Rover because doesn't that look fancy? But actually, the thing that I'm jealous of is not the Land Rover or the new Skoda or whatever. It's the fact that I don't have the money to buy this luxurious car. So you look beyond the thing that is superficial and look to the real fear underneath it. Look to the thing that's really keeping you back. I'm afraid that I don't have money. At the heart of that is this feeling of insecurity that I don't have a safety net. I don't have the ability to provide for my family. So really maybe going back to money mindset, which is something I had already discovered, like I really need to work on my mindset around money. That's a huge block for me. And instead of ignoring it, if I start working on it, then maybe I can start saving up enough money. Maybe I can build a business. Maybe I can do something productive. And now looking at all of this stuff, I know that this loss of the future dimension thing has been a big stumbling block for me with all of this as well. People who have loss of the future dimension disorder, whatever we're going to call it, syndrome, they have trouble career planning. They have trouble setting goals for themselves. They have trouble regulating their emotions. They have trouble with forming relationships with other people. These are all things that I recognize in myself. And I just can't believe that it isn't something I need to investigate. And one of the things that was happening now at this time was I was recognizing jealousy of certain people in my sphere of friends. And, I was thinking so much about this experiment that I had been running, this grand experiment of purpose and finding a job that made me feel like I had purpose in my life. And was that the right thing to be doing? And I was starting to understand that it's just part of a bigger picture. But I was still obsessed with figuring this thing out. And one person that I was particularly jealous of at the time that I was thinking about the jealousy map was a friend who had enrolled herself in a quite prestigious interior design graduate program. And she was spending a year going up to London several times a week and doing this program and designing things and learning the software and developing herself. And she had committed to this thing. She had boots on the ground and she was walking in this direction and she was going to come out of it with a career and contacts. And this is a really amazing program where she will have the credentials to just jump into this career. And she was looking so spiffy. She was looking so adult and put together and sophisticated and gorgeous. And her clothes looked like interior designer type clothes. And she had a nice bag and she didn't look all muddy because we live in the countryside and most of us look like that most of the time. She was going up to London and being an adult. She was becoming something for herself. And I was very jealous of this. And so I decided to run a little experiment for myself. Another part of the Artist Way that, if you remember, Julia Cameron asks in the very first chapter that you write every day in your journal, your morning pages for 3 pages, stream of consciousness. And that also you take yourself on what she calls an artist's date every single week. So you go off for an hour to 2 hours by yourself, without a dog, without a friend, without anybody, just you going someplace and soaking up your surroundings and allowing inspiration to come to you, just being open and aware and filling your cup. And I had maybe done this twice in the 12 weeks that I had been doing this course. And I was not alone. Most of the ladies in this group had not accomplished this either, because it's a testament to how busy we are, all of us as mums, most of us with jobs as well. Like, how can you fit an hour to 2 hours a week for yourself? What? That's crazy talk. So I thought, here was my plan. I'm going to take a whole day and I'm going to do what she does, and I'm going to go up to London. I'm going to take the train. It's only an hour for me to get up to London. I'm going to take the train after I drop off the kids, and I'm going to spend the day doing things that fill my cup, that I feel like will test my resolve around certain things or ideas of what my future could be, and just see how I feel around them. And so I did this. I made a plan. Charlie agreed he would pick up the kids after school, and I was going to stay in London, yes, even into the evening hours. And I was going to have dinner with my friend and then come home very late on the train and be fabulous. So it was a Friday. I could drink. The next day I could sleep in. And off I went. I got myself gussied up and some clothes that I thought were semi-appropriate, and realized I have no clothes that make me feel good about myself in a London city context. No shoes that aren't covered in mud. But, I made a semblance of myself, and I got on the train, and I had my bag, and I had my journal. I had a list of podcasts I wanted to listen to. I had a book that I was reading. I can't quite remember which one it was, but it was My Brilliant Friend, which was apparently New York Times critics voted it the best book of the 21st century so far. So I was reading that, and off I went. But then something happened. I was on the train platform and my phone rang, and it was my GP. And I picked up the phone. And I'm not sure if I told you about this, but I was feeling quite a lot of pain. I'd started picking up exercise again. As I said, I had decided that, I was going to make it a priority to fit half an hour of exercise into every single day and connect back to the person who I was before I had children and before I moved to this country without much sunlight. But the thing was, I was starting to experience a lot of pain in my back and around my side, like a vice grip around my waist that went down into my groin in the front and across my back in the back. And the pain radiated up my back, into my neck, and down my arm, and down my leg as well. And it was such that I had to take painkillers at night to sleep. Otherwise, it bothered me. And I was doing Pilates, and it wasn't taking care of it. And so I had talked to my GP, and she had referred me on to a physio. But the physio apparently had bounced back and said that she wanted me to go to oncology first, which, if you know, those are the cancer doctors. So immediately, as soon as the GP mentioned this on the phone, my body just reacted. What does this mean? Do they think that I might have cancer somewhere else, like in my ovaries or, my uterus or something? Cervical cancer? Is that why I'm having pain down into my groin around my side? But she said, don't panic, don't panic. She thought that they were wrong to do this, but she knows what they want. They want to have an x-ray and they want to have an ultrasound, and she's going to schedule those in to get done in the next couple of weeks, and then we can move on into physio. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to, no cart before the horse. I'm not going to jump to conclusions. She's the doctor. She has an intuition about this. I'm going to go with her, and I'm not going to freak out. So I said, okay, fine. Yep, you just schedule those in. Let me know when I need to show up someplace. And so then I went off on my merry way on the train, trying not to think about this, wrote my journal. I started listening to a Huberman Lab podcast about microplastics, which I had been meaning to listen to, which in hindsight maybe wasn't the best thing because it was not very uplifting. And I could hear in Andrew Huberman's voice this kind of resignation, this constant feeling of just heaviness that microplastics are ubiquitous and there's not much that we can do about it. It's in the soil, it's in the water. Animals, microorganisms, they're all eating this plastic, and it's disrupting our hormones, and it's creating all kinds of bad health outcomes. And he didn't really have any upside to this. Maybe not the best thing to be listening to at the time on this day that was supposed to be my jolly day out. But anyway, that brought me to the Chelsea Harbour Design Center. And I turned off the podcast, and I had arrived at my destination, which was the Chelsea Harbour Design Center is kind of the mecca of interior design in London. And Chelsea in itself is filled with all these very posh interior design type of shops, very expensive, way above my pay grade. But I was going to go here because my friend had been going here all the time, and her group, her class had been going there on trips. And, if you're an interior designer, you go and you make relationships with these sellers, with these shops, and you get accounts with them, you get discounts, blah, blah, blah. So I was going to go around and I was going to get samples for a project that I'm doing. And it's a project I'm still doing, which is to reupholster very simply some mid-century chairs that I got for free off of Facebook Marketplace. And I wanted to pick out some nice fabric that would zhuzh them up and make them look a little bit more expensive. And so I was going to find some samples for this, and also just enjoy myself and do some window shopping. But I definitely got this feeling, kind of like Pretty Woman style, of going into these shops, people looking me up and down, checking out my outfit and trying to suss out, who is she? Is she actually an interior designer? Is she in our industry, or is she just a time waster? And when you get samples, you have to write down your business and your contact information. And some people definitely wouldn't give me samples or I'd have to pay for the samples because it was quite apparent that I'm not a legitimate business. Some people were okay. And once I kind of got them off guard and was really friendly, then they would be friendly back. But there was this feeling of me pretending to be something that I'm not and trying to kind of fool people. And I noticed at one point that my heart was pounding in my chest and my hands were starting to sweat. And I realized that I was starting to have a panic attack, or what I perceived as a panic attack. The other option was it could have been a heart attack. But I started out, thinking this is probably a panic attack, and just take some deep breaths and keep carrying on and it will pass. It'll go by. Just ignore it and it will go away, because I'm really good at that. Ignore those feelings, just bury them down and they'll go away. But it kept going and my heart was racing in my chest, and I was starting to feel dizzy and a bit panicked and out of sorts. And I was also really annoyed because this was my day. God damn it, this was my day to go out and embody something that I might want to be in my future and see how it feels. Put on the shoes of my friend who's doing this amazing course. And I was jealous of. But something was going on internally. So I thought, okay, it's about lunchtime by this point. I'm going to go down to their cafe area, which is in this beautiful atrium with this big skylight above it and all these shops spiraling around it, kind of like Guggenheim-esque in New York. And it's a really nice cafe, and I'm going to have trout salad and sweet potato fries for a treat. Why not? It's healthy. It's sweet potato. And yeah, definitely a cappuccino, because what else do you do when you're having a heart attack or a panic attack? You take some caffeine with it. That's going to help, right? But, this is what I like to do at lunch. I like to have a cappuccino, so I'm going to do it. And I sat down and I started reading my book, and I thought, I'm going to calm myself down, and maybe I'm having a blood sugar thing. Who knows? But my heart kept pounding and I kept sweating in my palms. And I think, all right, I need to move. I need to go someplace else. I need to change this situation up. How can I recapture this day? How can I save this day and make it great again? I'm going to go to the Tate Modern. The Tate Modern, for those of you who don't know, is this colossal power station on the Thames across from St. Paul's Cathedral. Mammoth 1920s industrial Art Deco kind of architecture, this big behemoth block, and it's been transformed into a huge modern art museum. And it's one of my favorite places to go in London. And it connects me back to the person who I was when I was a teenager, when I was at university, when I wanted to be an artist so badly, but I didn't know what or who, what kind of artist, or if I could really do it. I had tons of self-doubt, but I studied art history and I worked in galleries, and this is part of me. This is part of who I am. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to connect with this thing that I know is a surefire hit for my artist date, and I will get some inspiration from it. And taking the tube across London, I could feel my heart pounding against the seat behind me, in my back, against my rib cage, pounding against the cage of my body. And I was like, this isn't good. I was Googling the difference between a heart attack and a panic attack, and how do you know? And both seemed to suggest that it shouldn't go on for this long. It had been maybe 3 hours now where my heart had been pounding, but hopefully this would change it. And I walked to the tape modern, still feeling agitated, and went straight up to the level where I usually go, which is the Dada and Surrealist, early modernist period, which is the place that I loved, that I studied the most in university, and I felt most connected to. And I thought, this is going to calm me down. But it did the reverse. I not only started to panic more, but I started to feel physically sick, like I was going to vomit on the floor in front of the Takirikos and the Duchamps and the all of these masterworks. And I started to feel really dizzy. I knew I had to sit down. And I was just thinking, what is doing this? What is triggering this? What is at the heart of what's happening right now? I was honestly starting to feel really scared. I felt like I could possibly die. Like it was feeling a lot like must be a heart attack. My heart was pounding so hard and I felt so sick. And yet I still didn't want to go to the doctor or the hospital because that would just ruin this day. This day was supposed to be special. This was supposed to be a day for me to enjoy. And they would just laugh at me and say that I was having a panic attack. And I'd been having panic attacks, not terribly often, but occasionally over the last 10 years, they had come up. How do I fix this? And it brings me back to think about our friend Dr. K, Dr. Alok Kanoja. We talked about him before. He studied for 7 years to become a monk before he realized he needed to go back to school. And he studied at Harvard to become a psychiatrist. And he specializes in the marrying of these two worlds. He loves the crossover between East and West, and particularly these kind of like complementary alternative approaches that are studied by science and have been proven to work. And why do they work? Why do the old ways work? And what is Eastern medicine, what is Western medicine missing in its approach? So I love him for all of this because also, and he talks about this, the West is good at giving you pills and good at finding the generic kind of condition that you might have, but it's not good at tailoring it to the individual, and it's not good at DIY. The DIY stuff you get more with the Eastern traditions, where you have to go inside and do the work on yourself and become aware and become more in touch with yourself. And he sees this as being hugely beneficial for mental aches and pains, but also physical. So Dr. K had talked about this, what do you do with a quarter life crisis? And the thing that I had realized about my quarter life crisis, which I think made me repeat into a third life crisis and a midlife crisis, was the fact that I didn't go deep enough down in with myself. I'll remind you of the steps to survive a life crisis. You feel trapped, and then you undergo this period where you start to disconnect from your life, and then you have to get physical distance away from it. And then you have to turn inward and you have to get connected down deep into what are the things that make you tick? What are the drivers under your emotions, your discontent? And then you have to craft a new life based on this knowledge of what is more in line with your deep internal desires and personality and identity, right? But I realized that the thing that I kept skipping was this part, getting in touch with the things that are subconsciously driving you. And a lot of that has to do with trauma. A lot of that, I think anyone who's dealt with trauma, who has trauma in their backstory, knows that it's, at least for me, the instinct is to bury it and to just move on, especially as a good old New Englander. is to just be tough around it, and it will resolve itself. Leave it in the past. But the thing is, Dr. K says, is that's not how it works. That's not how trauma works. So how do we heal our trauma? This is what I wanted to know, and I think you might want to know as well. And Dr. K helpfully gives us a roadmap. And all of this is basically most of it's from the interview with Stephen Bartlett in Diary of a CEO entitled Dr. Brain Rot, I think, which was my first introduction to Dr. K. But then I've listened to Dr. K on so many other podcasts, but most of this is coming from that episode called Dr. Brain Rot. So he has a roadmap for how we heal our trauma. The first thing he says is you have to understand where trauma sits and why it's messing with you. And the reason is because it is affecting your sense of identity. And this was a thing that I had never considered. Like, I don't even think I've really considered my identity. I just kind of live my life and assume that my identity just comes along with me and is self-evident, but I've never really thought much about it in a clarified way. But he says all of us have a backstory, basically, just like superheroes. He uses the example of Batman, saw his parents murdered, and that triggered him to become this vigilante of justice. We all have these backstories that have significant emotional moments that create who we are, that we react against and we adapt around, and that form our personality and our identity. So all of this stuff happens, and a lot of it happens, very unintentionally in our past, and we adapt around it. And if you have trauma in your backstory, you might think that you bury it. You might think that you've dealt with it, but you probably haven't. And the problem is that even if you tidy it up and lock it in a box in the back room, you will be triggered by things along the way. And those triggers will bring back up this trauma, and it will affect you. It will color your decision making. It will color your perspective and the way that you navigate your present. And the problem there is that has a huge knock-on effect on your destiny and who you can become. Because these traumas in the backstory are often telling us things about ourselves that are affecting what we believe about ourselves, our self-beliefs, our self-worth. And this is where we get these negative core beliefs, which you might have heard this term bandied around in self-helpery and around the internet, the Instagram sphere, the TikTokiness. Negative self-beliefs have a huge effect on us because they tell us what we can achieve. He uses a very simple example of if you think you're a loser, then you probably will create a life accordingly to that. You will not take big chances that someone who is not a loser would take, And the problem is that whatever you believe about yourself, you might think that you're keeping it a secret, but you're not. It is being projected out of you, and people can feel it, they can sense it, they can read it in you. And that's where you get this feeling of, when somebody's being authentic or not authentic, and you can just sense it. That's that empathic resonance. And remember what Dr. K said. I think he said 50 to 80% of how we communicate with each other is empathic resonance, not verbal. So only 20 to 50% of how we communicate is verbal. The rest of it comes from tone of voice, from a look, from body language, the energy someone's giving off, the tension in the air between people. You know what I mean? He used an example of how he knew if he came into a classroom and everyone stopped talking and you get that tension in the air, that he knew that they had been talking about him, that type of thing. We have this. And if you think you're a loser, chances are other people can feel that belief that you have in yourself, and they're going to think you're a loser as well. This is obviously like a very heavy-handed example, but it's nuanced and you can feel it. You feel when somebody is charismatic, when somebody is authentic, There's this power within them. There's this refreshing feeling about them that they are aligned with something, and it's very powerful. But if you have doubts about yourself, people will sense it and it will hold you back. You won't go for that promotion. Or if you do go for that promotion, they will sense that you have doubts about yourself and they probably won't give you that job. So this is where your backstory is very important, because if you have trauma in your backstory that is coloring your identity, coloring your belief of who you are, and giving you these negative core beliefs, are they true? Or is this a story that you've been telling yourself? And often it isn't necessarily true. It's a story that you've told yourself because of some trauma in your background that you have not accepted and let dissolve and moved on from. And when Dr. K talked about this identity stuff, I found it really interesting. But then around Christmas time recently, this last Christmas, I was in the magazine aisle doing some opportunistic magazine shopping, which I don't usually do, but around the Christmas holidays, I like to indulge myself with some treats to read. And there's the magazine, The New Scientist, which is kind of like science light for the rest of us to read. And it was all about, let me see if I can find it. The title was How to Think About the Human Mind. And I picked it up, and there was, guess what? An article all about your identity and your self-narrative. Can rewriting your personal narrative improve your life? They also had another article in it called Can You Change Your Personality? And I know what you're thinking. Isn't identity and personality the same thing? Apparently not. And we're going to get into this next episode because that's a whole other ball of wax, which I have some stuff to talk about with. So put that in the back of your brain for later. So what about identity? What is identity then? Identity in psychology has traditionally been focused on a person's beliefs, their morals, their goals, social roles and labels. And there's an emphasis within that on how you compare yourself to others. So that's interesting, considering jealousy, right? But then this guy named Dan McAdams in the 1980s, who's a psychology professor now, I think, at Northwestern, he came up with this idea, which he called the life story model of identity. And it hypothesizes that actually your identity is all of these things that you care about, your beliefs, your morals, your goals, your social roles, but they fit into this reflection of this life story, a self-narrative, an autobiography, a backstory that we tell ourselves. And it gives you a sense of who you are and how you fit into the world and into the time periods that you have lived through. And researchers found that there was a huge variation in people's ability to do this for themselves, to create these backstories and understand this bigger picture, this story about themselves. And what they found was that this has a huge effect on people's mental health. People who have more vivid chronological understanding of their life story, of the story that they tell themselves, more colorful, more episodic, these people have stronger sense of meaning and identity and purpose and greater life satisfaction. And what they found with people who have vaguer senses of their life story and their narrative, these people are more likely to suffer from depression and anxiety and mental illnesses and have less life satisfaction and sense of purpose and direction. So it makes a difference, it seems, this understanding of yourself. And I never thought about that. And maybe this corresponds with the fact that I have had historically low levels of purpose and direction. And I've had a lot of depression and anxiety. So the other thing that they found was that people who have these more intricate life stories also tend to do two things within their life story. They focus a lot on a sense of agency, their ability to recognize that they are the architects of events in their life, or that they had an active role in setting goals and achieving things throughout their life. So they have agency. They also had strong ideas of redemption in their story. And these stories, you got to think of them like a character from a film or a book. Your life story has a plot, and it has characters, and it has villains, and you have these episodes that happen. And people who can see redemption moments within this story, meaning that bad things happened, but they were able to bend the story to show that they grew from these bad events, that they learned something, and that they were able to improve themselves because of bad events that happened to themselves. Redemptive moments. So agency and redemption. In contrast, psychologists have seen that people who have depression and anxiety tend to see life as not being within their power, but something that is happening to them. And they are being pushed and pulled by forces external to themselves. They also tend to have this view whereby they think they've ruined things, or that they're incapable of forming healthy relationships. So you can see the difference between these two mindsets, these two perspectives on your life. One, you have power to change things and to pivot and to feel like it's a dance with external factors that are happening to you. And then there's a lightness to it. And the other one is much more of a feeling of not having power to change things, and just having to go along with being browbeaten and not having this positive outlook on future. You feel like you're a bit of a victim of events happening to you, and you're broken. And I can identify personally with this last viewpoint. And it's good to see from a bird's eye view the difference between them. And they had a really neat and tidy example, which I thought was great, of a study of people who were new to Alcoholics Anonymous. And they found that people who had a very clear, vivid story around their last drink, kind of like an aha moment story, were 80% likely to still be sober 4 months later, as opposed to people who had a very vague story around their last drink. Those people were only 40% likely to be sober. So it's how we reflect on our life story and how much control we feel like we have over our life, and how opportunistic we are and optimistic around challenges. It goes right back to the whole lack thinking versus abundant thinking mindset, and to know that you can actually change it for yourself, because that's what this article says. You can change this perspective on your life story. And they gave some examples of studies that were done, and one of them I thought was really interesting that they did on teenagers. They gave them an exercise where they had to reflect on a time that they had succeeded and a time that they had failed. And then half the group was given an extra assignment whereby they took a time when they succeeded, a time they failed, and they had to reflect on how they had made the success happen for themselves and how they had taken the failure and learned from it. And that group of people started to see better results in their grades. Their grades were improving, as opposed to the other group, which didn't see improvement in their grades. So it's just this kind of, we're zhuzhing our brains and the style with which we reflect on our life. And it just is this little bit of flip that we can do, the spin. We can spin it to our advantage, right? It's pretty cool. So now you have a good idea about this life story model of identity and how it affects us. Let's get back to what Dr. K says about healing our trauma, which is embedded in that backstory. So if in your identity, in your backstory, you've got trauma, basically what's happening is you are carrying it with you subconsciously. And it is subconsciously coloring your sense of self and who you think you are. And that is coloring the choices that you make and the way you project your personality, your identity, to your peers and people around you. And it is keeping you from potentially becoming the person you want to be. Your destiny is being tethered by this trauma in your backstory. And remember, he said it's like you've got a drink and you've got piss in your drink. And you can keep adding sugar to your drink. You can buy a new fancy car. You can get clothes. You can get a nice haircut. You can put on the semblance of being somebody that you want to be. But if you still have piss in your drink, it's still piss in your drink and it's going to be affecting the drink. You need to get the piss out. So how do we do that? First of all, first step, Dr. K says, is you need safety. We've talked about this before. Safety first, safety first. And why do we need safety? You must not skip this step. Safety is required for your brain to have neuroplasticity. If you do not feel safe, then your brain locks itself in and goes into the survival mode. You go into lack thinking, which we talked about with Dr. Tara Swart. And lack thinking puts you on this treadmill of trying to survive each day. Remember, Dr. K described the difference between the catabolic state and the anabolic state. In the catabolic state, you are basically eating yourself to survive. If a tiger jumps out from the tree, your body goes into fight or flight, and you start to actually break down your muscle fibers in order to access quick energy to get away from that tiger. So consider that's your lack thinking mindset. That's what happens when you're in survival mode. If you do not feel safe, your body is continually just breaking down its reserves to survive the present moment, and it's never building for the future. If you're in an anabolic state, your body is storing fat and it's building muscle and it's creating this machine, yourself, your body, that can survive the future, that can flourish into the future and create something bigger than the present moment, right? So that's when you move forward into this abundant thinking. This is when you access the ability to set goals for yourself and imagine a future and create a future for yourself. So safety is really important. And he says, even, if you're in an abusive relationship or someplace, you're in a war zone, get out of it, obviously. But even if you're in an unsafe environment, you can create a pocket of safety to start with. And from that place, neuroplasticity can start. You can start to change and to grow, right? And I found in the last couple of years, I realized how unsafe I felt and how much my safety was coming from myself. Not only was it coming from my trauma and my idea of shame and the things that I felt about myself and subconsciously told myself, the gremlins on my back were constantly telling me, you're good for nothing, you're not smart, your brain is foggy all the time, your body is giving out on you, you're pathetic, you're a waste of space. Even if these voices were not screaming, they were whispering in the background. And that was my sense of self. And I listened to the last episode of the podcast, or this, the Vision of the Future episode, the one that this is continuing on from. And I was struck a bit by how I told you a bit too much about my gremlins and about the nasty voices in my head. And it made me feel like I regretted it a bit, opening up and telling you all these nasty thoughts that I have in my head all the time. And I realized that it's because I was letting you into my identity, the identity that I feel like I keep hidden, that no one else can sense. But it's this thing that Dr. K talks about empathic resonance. Even though I thought I was keeping all of those dark thoughts about myself a secret, it was coloring how I behave because I believe those thoughts. And so my identity is married with those thoughts. I think that I'm a waste of space, then how I act and empathic resonance will show that, and people will sense it. So I felt a bit exposed by that last episode. But at the same time, I realized that, the only way to get past these negative self-beliefs is to recognize them and accept them. And this goes on to the next thing that Dr. K talks about. Dr. K says the next step, you've got safety, you're building yourself a little pocket of safety in your life to start with, perhaps. And from there, you start to grow by becoming aware. The second step is awareness and emotional regulation. And awareness is this powerful thing that we talked about. Dr. K thinks 90% of the problem is awareness, and that's what I have discovered over this last year. When I learned this from Dr. K, when I listened to this episode, I was also simultaneously learning this from Dr. Tara Swart, who talks about it, how awareness is so important, and it is the thing that moves the dial the most, just becoming aware. And I was also learning it from Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way. And it was this revelation where I was like, all of these people are telling me to do the same thing. They're just egging me to become aware of the self-sabotaging subconscious censor within me that I've been carrying around since childhood. And you start to realize, like, some of these things that I believe about myself, I believe because some kid named Eric in the 3rd grade told me that I was stupid. Some teacher graded a paper and gave me an F on something, and that solidified this idea in my head that I was stupid, even though I proved it wrong over and over again by becoming a straight A student and becoming student government president and salutatorian and all of these things. I could achieve all of these things, but I still deep down believed what that 8-year-old boy, Eric, said about me when he said that I was stupid. I still believe that. And I'm a 46-year-old woman. Get over it. Well, I haven't. It's the piss in my drink. And what awareness will do is suddenly make you realize these things, that you're believing something an 8-year-old told you. Why? There's no evidence anymore for that. Get rid of it. So as you become aware, and Julia Cameron in her Artist's Way, this is basically the whole premise. She starts out from the beginning talking about something called the censor and how you need to start noticing when your censor pipes up. So you'll be doing something and you might start to feel quite proud or pleased with yourself, but there's this voice in the back of your head which is like, don't get ahead of yourself. Like, what do you think, you're like Pablo Picasso here? Come on, look at this. This is not original. This isn't interesting. You're just stupid. Your censor pipes up and will say something in the back of your head and it just kind of knocks you down and keeps you in your place. And you believe this censor. And she talks about these blurts, which are these little tiny statements that you will, if you start to become aware, you will notice coming up all the time. So like when I'm recording this podcast and I can't quite come up with a turn of phrase, the blurts will come pretty thick and heavy, like, you shouldn't be doing this. Who are you? Why are you even trying to do this? Like, you don't have an original thought in your head. You're thick. You should just go lie down. Stay in your lane. Like, these are these little blurts. Again, I'm exposing myself, aren't I? Well, these are the thoughts in my head, but I don't think I'm alone. I think most of you probably have these self-sabotaging core negative beliefs that pop up all the time. And Julie Cameron says, just start writing them down. Oh, God, doesn't that sound horrible? I don't want to listen to them, let alone write them down. But something magical happens when you write them down. You are exposing them to the light of day. And you realize how much of a hold they have over you, but where did they come from? And then she has this exercise called the time machine. And this is like in the first chapter. And I didn't really realize what she was doing until recently. She has something called the time machine, where you go back and you break up your life into like 5-year chunks, and you write a narrative of those 5 life chunks. You go back and you think, what are the significant things that happened? This goes back to what Dr. K says. You have emotional moments through your life, and it is these emotional moments that created you and created your identity. So go back in 5-year chunks and try to remember what were the significant things that happened in those 5-year chunks, and who were your villains? Who were your villains, and what were the things that they said to you at the time? And who were your heroes? And who were your friends? What were the negative things? What were the positive things? But what you'll start to see is a lot of these blurts and the stuff that the censor is saying in your head come from these events and these villains in your backstory. And this, you start to think about this narrative and people who have a strong sense of this narrative, of this backstory, and they know the plot and they know the characters and they know the villains. These people have better health outcomes. They have a stronger sense of self, of meaning, of direction, of purpose, of life satisfaction, higher life satisfaction. So it's worth doing. And these teenage kids who had to go write backstories for themselves, narratives, and write creatively in a creative writing sense about their life story, started to perform better in school and get better results. It's because we can start to see maybe how our backstory we don't have to believe it as we have. Maybe we'll start to understand it differently and see how some of these things actually shaped us in a way where we became stronger, we redeemed ourselves. So this is what awareness can give us. And the time machine exercise that Julia Cameron gives us, and listening to your blurts. And this is where she gets into the affirmations as well. So the affirmations, she then says, are antidotes to your blurts, which I thought is a really interesting way of looking at it. And I didn't put this all together until recently, that this is why it's working for me, until I realized that identity and your sense of identity is this crazy powerful tool that we could use that is helping some people and not helping the rest of us who don't have the strong sense of identity. And the affirmations we talked about, yes, you might feel like there's something cheesy and new agey, and you might not want to touch them with a 10-foot pole. And I personally really don't like, those posters that say there's no time like the present or blah, blah, blah. I don't know. There's something that always seemed eternally cheesy about these kind of things. But make them personal and write them in your journal and just keep it for yourself as your personal antidotes to your blurts. And you might figure out, working backwards, like the affirmations that kind of ring for you that you want to work with. And often it's because you have these blurts that you are subconsciously ignoring. And actually, these are the antidotes to those blurts. You're giving yourself a direction, you're giving yourself an action, and you're rewriting your identity. You're rewriting your sense of self and giving yourself agency and giving yourself redemption. And I'll remind you, affirmations are like positive statements of self-belief, kind of like, I'll tell you the ones that I use all the time that have worked for me. But Julie Cameron has lists of them, and you can definitely find lists of them online, I'm sure. But I do think it's in the wording. Some of them sound really cheesy to me, and I think it's something about the wording. I think sometimes affirmations can be delusional, and sometimes they can be permission to change the way you think about yourself and how you treat yourself, and your permission to change and to create a future for yourself. So the one that I use the most is I arrive and am led. I arrive and am led. And I love this one because it reminds me that whenever I come into a situation, don't be scared, don't have anxiety, just show up and be open to whatever is going to happen, and you will be led, and you'll be surprised if you let go of needing to control the situation, and your creativity and your mind will help you out, and it will all be there. Also, I listen and I'm led, and it reminds me that oftentimes if you have a goal or you have something you want to accomplish, if you just arrive and listen and pay attention, all of a sudden the answers are going to be there. And the universe seems to throw things at you in the synchronicity type of fashion. It happens all the time. But if you're not paying attention, you'll miss those opportunities. And this brings me to talk about something else. So Ken Robinson, who is no longer with us, which I find so sad because he's just this phenomenal force and this proponent of fostering creativity. And he has this amazing TED Talk from like 2006, I think. And Charlie, bless him, gave me for Christmas his book, The Element, which is all about finding your element that makes you flourish. The place, the thing, like what is it in the world and in your life that makes you the best version of yourself, finding this thing, and how do you do it? And I love this book. It's fantastic. Ken Robinson talks about a study of people who think that they're extremely lucky and people who think they're extremely unlucky. And psychologists wanted to see what makes these two groups of people tick and think this thing about themselves. And so they set up a cafe and they peopled it with actors. And what they did was they put a £5 note on the pavement outside on the sidewalk. And they sent one of the very lucky people down to the cafe to get a cup of coffee. And this person saw the £5 note, picked it up, went into the cafe, ordered a coffee for themselves and also for the person in line behind them, and then struck up a conversation with this person. And they ended up exchanging details because they had something in common and they wanted to talk about it. Then they sent the person who considered themselves very unlucky. And what happened? They stepped right over the £5 note, went in, ordered a coffee, paid for it, and left. And when they asked those two people about their day and if anything significant happened, the lucky person said, yeah, I found a £5 note on the ground and I met somebody in the cafe and we have this thing in common and we're going to get together and talk about it. They had made a new contact. They had created an opportunity for themselves. The unlucky person said nothing significant happened that day. So can you see a difference between these two people? Well, a psychologist named Richard Wiseman wrote a book called The Luck Factor and talks about 4 principles that he found that support lucky people in becoming lucky. Basically, lucky people maximize chance opportunity. They create and notice and act upon things that they see around them. So they're observing and open. Secondly, they're effective at listening to their intuition, and they also do work to strengthen their intuition, such as meditation. Thirdly, they expect to be lucky. They anticipate positive outcomes. And the fourth thing is they turn bad luck to good. So there's that redemption thing. Even if something bad happens, they have a way of flipping it and redeeming the situation and learning from it and using it as a stepping stone, another opportunity for growth. So this all comes back to abundant thinking. People who are abundant thinkers are open to possibility. They are looking for opportunities. They grab opportunities and they make things happen for themselves. This is where I want to go. This is the type of identity I want. This is the type of person I want to be. So then Dr. K says, as you become more aware, you start to regulate your emotions. You start to understand the drivers and the motivations internally deep down that are creating your sense of identity and coloring your choices and your decisions. And you have a choice to, you can change it. You can accept trauma that's happened in your background and kind of dissolve it. Your problems will melt away, he said. The more aware you become, your problems just melt away. And that also reminded me, interestingly, of something Cortland Dahl said in the Healthy Minds Project. So the Healthy Minds Project is this app that helps teach you how to meditate and the science behind meditation. I just love it. It's free. And I've done the whole program once and started to do it a second and a third time. And I just think it's fantastic. And you can choose to do 5-minute meditations, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 25, and they've got sleep meditations. They got all kinds of stuff. It's great. And Courtland Doll has this lovely voice, and I just love meditating with him. But he says about awareness, there's a whole segment all about building awareness. And your attention, remember your flashlight, is the root of your awareness. So how to become more attuned to your flashlight and how you are using it, and creating this sense of open awareness is kind of the whole goal, the foundation of your meditation practice and becoming mindful, is this ability to be openly aware. So he says about awareness that awareness is naturally open and accepting. He says, when you practice connecting to the open quality of awareness, you are beginning a profound shift, a shift from resistance and unmet expectations to emotional balance and inner composure. With practice, you'll be able to notice your own reactions and impulses and be able to manage them in a healthy way. This is how awareness leads to emotional regulation, which is part of that second step that Dr. K said. First, we get safety, we get a pocket of safety so we can get neuroplasticity. Then we develop awareness, and out of awareness, you build emotional regulation. It just naturally happens. You start to get the piss out of your drink. And how do we become more aware? Dr. K says we do things like psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is a great way to become aware of the things that are creating your identity, your sense of self, your backstory, to analyze your backstory, and to find the piss that's in your drink. Psychotherapy will help you with that. And then mindfulness and meditation. These practices, like I've said before, do the meditation apps, do the Healthy Minds Project. This has been the thing that I found so helpful. And you do things like The Artist Way, or you do any of these self-help books. They're all developing awareness, right? But I really think it's the mindfulness and the meditation that takes you to that next level of just being able to sit with yourself and start to pay attention and being open and curious and non-judgmental. And like Courtland Doll says, like he promises, it will just, as you develop this open awareness, then self-regulation comes with that. So then what's the next thing that happens after you've done this step? The next step that you need to take in order to heal your trauma, Dr. K says, is that then we need to build a new identity. And this is where hopefully all the things I've just told you about identity and your personal narrative and how you can change it just by becoming aware, doing the time machine exercise from Julia Cameron's The Artist Way, listening to your blurts, finding some affirmations that help you, that are not delusional, but give you the ability to accept yourself and also to allow yourself to take care of yourself and to grow and to change. These are all powerful tools to help you. And what they will do is create a new sense of identity, a new, more colorful narrative, a more accepting narrative that's full of agency and redemption. And as you do this, a new destiny will unfold for yourself. This is the promise that Dr. K says. Your sense of self and your identity determine your destiny. Because the things that you are thinking subconsciously about yourself, those negative, nasty core beliefs, they are coloring all the choices that you're making, and they are holding you back, and they're determining what your destiny can be. They're keeping your destiny tethered. But if we can get the piss out of our drink, if we can heal our trauma, we can create the identity we want. And then we can create a destiny for ourselves that we want. One that we're not delusional about, one that we feel aligned with, that is authentic. And when you feel aligned and authentic within yourself, there is this power to it. And you recognize it when you see somebody who seems authentic. They seem so okay with themselves, and comfortable in their own skin. And they're just floating along. They're powerfully just changing the world. creating stuff. And you want that. I'm jealous of that. My jealousy map says that that's where I want to go. But now I know that I can't just fake it till I make it like that. This is how we build a new destiny for ourselves. Now, let's go back to me, and it's all about me, guys. Let's go back to me and my heart attack that was happening. Remember, I was at the Tate Modern and I was trying to figure out, like, why am I having this freaking panic attack or heart attack or whatever it is? What is going on? What has triggered it? And is it because I'm trying to be somebody else by coming to London? Is it because I don't believe that I can become somebody else, that I can have a future for myself? Is it because I'm afraid I have cancer again? Is it because, what is it that's triggering? Is it microplastics? What is triggering this panic attack? And so I was in this gallery and I was feeling woozy and like I was going to be physically sick on the paintings. And so I knew I had to go sit down. So I went downstairs to the cafe, and the cafe was just transforming from being a daytime joint to an evening venue. They were closing the curtains. And I looked out across the Thames, because it's right on the Thames, and I could see St. Paul's Cathedral, and the dome of St. Paul's was illuminated in pink from the sunset. And it's this just beautiful, beautiful architectural masterwork of the old world and of old London. And here I was sitting in this place on the Thames, which was the place that I found myself back when I was 23 and I left New York, and I was dedicating myself finally to become an actor, the thing that I had always wanted to be since I was 3 years old. I had always wanted to be an actor, and I was dedicating myself to it. And I went to London because I always felt somehow more in line with a British sensibility and British actors. And I loved London so much, and it did feel like my spiritual home. And here I was again. I was sitting here just looking at the Thames, and I was sitting with my book. And I got a glass of Prosecco, because that's the other thing that you do if you think you're having a heart attack, is you drink alcohol, right? I had wound myself up with a cappuccino at lunch, and that didn't help my panic attack, but maybe some alcohol will. But I was sitting there, and I was people watching, all these young people coming in, flirting with each other, obviously on dates, getting drinks, remembering myself back when I was 23 and I had just landed in London, in this place that held so much potential, but I had so much pain. And I had so many gremlins on my back and so much trauma in my backstory that I was not accessing, and I was squashing, and I was trying to become something that I wanted to become without dealing with them. And now I'm dealing with them. And a DJ starts setting up a booth next to me, and I'm getting the idea that maybe sitting here reading my book isn't the best place to be. So I went out and I started to walk to the restaurant where I'm meeting my friend Lucy. And my friend Lucy is always late. This is part of her identity. She's always late, and she's always carrying a gigantic bag filled with stuff. She's always late. But I found the restaurant, which was a Thai restaurant tucked away just behind the hospital. So I knew, if I'm actually having a heart attack, which I still might be having, somebody will take me to Guy's and St. Thomas's, which is right there. And Lucy will take me. She'll take care of me. And the thing about Lucy is that she's already had breast cancer as well. She had breast cancer 15 years before I had breast cancer. And her mother died of the BRCA gene 26 years ago. So Lucy's been through it. She was able to get through breast cancer in her early 30s and save everything so that she could have children, with the plan that she would get everything removed once she had had her children. That was on the cards, and that's how it's happened. But I hadn't seen her since I had gotten breast cancer and had my surgery and everything. But she's always been there for me. She's one of my dearest, bestest, oldest friends. I met her way back when I was 23 years old, 24, 23, back when I had just landed in London as a young actor. And we've been friends ever since. And I feel safe with her. And I recognized that as soon as she walked in carrying that heavy bag late as usual, seeing her beautiful smile, I just felt so safe and so good. And I told her immediately, I think I'm having a heart attack, but you'll take me to the hospital if I am, right? And she was like, yeah, no worries. Don't worry. Let's have a drink. And we sat down, and she is so amazing. She is so powerful. I could see things, a darkness settling over her around the time of the breast cancer and everything, but she survived it. She got through it. And she has this eternal lightness that shines within her, and this humor, this amazing humor and beautiful smile. And I told her all about my cancer, and it felt good to be like, not woe is me, but just like, we did it. And, you move on and you get stronger. You get stronger from these things. And that's exactly how I felt about my experience being diagnosed with breast cancer, going through the fear of it all, understanding that my diagnosis so early was such a blessing. Seeing the bigger picture and the perspective, it could have been so much worse. And so many people, my friend Amy, all these people I know who have breast cancer, who are dealing with chemo and drugs and having their estrogen stopped. And, we do get stronger from it, but it's freaking hard. So I want to recognize all of them. And my friend Lucy, who's just amazing, has been through all this stuff and just keeps on trucking on. And we had such a good time that night. A couple glasses of wine more, great Thai curry. I didn't notice the time. And when I checked my phone, I realized all of a sudden, oh my God, with that shock, it's 11:30. My train leaves at 11:45, and it's the last train of the evening. We quickly paid the bill, and I rushed outside, and Lisa was like, just come to my house if you miss it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And I hailed a cab. I was thinking, do I run to the station, Waterloo? Do I take a tube? Do I take a cab? Take a cab. And I got into the cab, and I said, my train leaves in 15 minutes. Can you get me to Waterloo Station? And he said, we can try. And he sped off. You could see he was quite excited about this. And we did all the things they do in movies. We swerved around cars. We went down back alleyways. And this guy was, a classic London taxi driver. He had done the knowledge. He knows all the back roads. He doesn't have to use Waze. He doesn't use Google. He knows. And we got stopped at stoplights. We're waiting. And then we veer off again, taking all the back alleyways. And then he screeches up to the side of Waterloo Station. And he says, run. And I got out of the taxi and I said, thank you, and ran. I sprinted down the concourse, trying to figure out what track am I going to, and found the track, put my ticket into the machine, which takes ages to go through and ages to open the gate, and I rush, and the train is halfway down the platform, still parked, but they parked it way far away from the gate. Why? And I'm sprinting down, and there's an open door, and I leap into the door and land, and I'm in the train. I made it. And everyone's there. It's totally crowded. People sitting on the floor with open chip and fried chicken, all drunk. And my heart is racing. It is pounding, but in the best possible sense. I can feel adrenaline coursing through my body and this feeling of like elation and happiness. And, I feel adrenalized. It feels good. And I'm walking down through the train, and eventually I finally find a seat. And yeah, it reminded me suddenly of something Dr. K had said. He said that if ever one of his clients is feeling emotionally reactive, like they're going to have a panic attack, he makes them go outside and sprint for 60 seconds or do as many push-ups as they can do in 60 seconds. I totally didn't remember this. If I had remembered it earlier in the day, maybe I could have resolved the situation a little bit earlier, but here I was. And you do that because if you push yourself into your fight or flight, into your sympathetic nervous system, you get cortisol racing, you get adrenaline pumping. When you stop, there's an automatic flip, a lever that happens, and it flips you into your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest. It turns off that adrenaline, that cortisol and everything in order to help you to recover. And there it was working for me. And it was great, and I felt good. And I felt, things are going to be okay. Things are being okay. And like this day maybe didn't go according to plan, but I'm learning stuff from it. I'm going to figure out why I had this panic attack. And I figured out that going to the Chelsea Design Center did not make me feel good. It made me feel other and like I was in the wrong place. And going to the Tate Modern, I don't know. That's my past. That's something my past. But sitting in the cafe looking out over the Thames, thinking about the generations of people, Shakespeare was just a couple blocks away from me, probably having a poo way back when. You know, Sir Christopher Wren, who built St. Paul's Cathedral, was there so many hundreds of years ago, also probably having a poo. You know, we're all just here together and making our lives. And then to hang out with my brilliant friend, just like the book. See what I did there? My brilliant friend. And to feel safe, to feel that safety and happiness and oxytocin, which was coming. And it's all going to be fine. And I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to arrive and I'm going to be led. And I'm going to make things happen for myself. And that's where I want to leave this episode. I want you to remember these things. You need safety. If you build awareness, you will become more emotionally regulated and more emotionally intelligent, and your troubles will melt away, as Dr. K promises. I'm not going to promise it. He promises it. And then you have a choice. You can build a new identity for yourself, which will change your destiny, which will allow you to build a destiny that you desire, one that you admire, one that you could even be a bit jealous of, but also one that you deserve because it aligns with you and we are being true to ourselves. And in that, there is power, right? Don't we want that? That sounds great to me. So let's do it. All right. Share this with anyone who has some piss in their drink, like myself. Let's get the piss out of it. And yeah, come back again. I'm going to take a little bit of a break now, just so you know, because I'm working on something. I have a little project in my other wheelhouse, which I've figured out is kind of actually the same wheelhouse. It's all aligned with me. It's my Pilates wheelhouse. I'm developing an online 8-week program. And if you're curious, I'll put a link in my show notes to the website, to my Pilates website, and you can check it out and join the wait list. It's going to be all about the things that people skip. The fundamentals, the foundational work that is the most important that I still just come back to. Every single time I practice Pilates, you always come back to it and you always keep strengthening it and reminding yourself of it. But so many classes skip this thing. Anyway, I will talk about it in another episode. But if you are curious about it, go check it out and join the waitlist. Otherwise, I'm going to come back with another episode of the podcast after that, and we're going to talk about personality, and we're going to talk about habits and how habits can help us with our identity. It's really interesting. We're also on our way towards learning more about Dr. Tara Swart and the manifestation stuff, which I'm going to start to put into play, and I'll tell you what happened, what came from all of this manifesting. All right, guys, I'm going to leave you with that. I hope that there's sun where you are. If there is, just find a little pocket of it somewhere. Give yourself some safety with that sun. And may the welly be very much with you. And I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.